Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight we're diving straight into one of history's most chaotic road trips, the Crusades. A time when thousands of people decided to pack up whatever scraps of armor, bread, and courage they had and march across Europe chasing an idea of holy glory. Spoiler, most of them had no clue what they were doing. But before we head out into mud, blisters, and questionable stew, do the usual. Make yourself comfortable. Maybe dim the lights, pull up a blanket, or let a fan hum in the background like medieval bagpipes. And as always, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's one of my favorite things, seeing people listening from all over, night owls in California, early risers in London, or someone in Singapore trying to fall asleep with tales of knights and goats. So picture this: you're sitting in a crowded village square, probably still smelling of livestock, when a man in long robes climbs onto a platform. He's red in the face, voice booming, waving his arms around like he's chasing invisible pigeons. He preaches about sin, salvation, and how the Holy Land, wherever that is, belongs to all Christians. You don't even know where Jerusalem sits on the map. Somewhere east of France, south of your pig farm, far enough that you'd rather not walk there. But the promise is too good to ignore. Fight for God, and all your sins are forgiven, even the one you hoped he didn't notice last spring behind the mill house. Turns out, yes, he keeps receipts. The crowd murmurs and something inside you stirs. Not conviction exactly, more like boredom mixed with beer. You've ploughed the same field for 14 years. Your diet is onions, barley, and anything small enough not to run from the pot. Eternally sounds better than milking goats in the rain again. You're not looking for adventure. You're looking for something that isn't the same muddy routine. And suddenly, here's a ticket out. Fast forward to the tavern that evening. The sermon's still buzzing in your head, but now it's drowned out by mugs of weak ale. The conversations start casual, complaining about weather, taxes, and Gerald's terrible singing voice. Then someone mentions Jerusalem, someone else toasts to God's favor, and before you know it, you're shouting oaths you barely understand, slapping the table so hard the candle sputters out. 3 drinks in, and you've apparently promised to march across continents with people you wouldn't trust to borrow your rake. Morning comes like a blacksmith hammering inside your skull. You wake up hungover, clutching a wooden cross someone sewed onto your tunic, and wearing boots that definitely aren't yours. You don't remember swearing loyalty to a crusade, but the priest is already blessing you, villagers are patting your back, and Gerald, shirtless as always, is carving a wooden shield with the words, "Jesus, watch this," in something resembling Latin. You're officially Crusader. Congratulations. Except you've had 0 training. No one handed you a manual. You don't even know how far this march is supposed to go. You were told to bring what you could, so you show up armed with a kitchen knife, a frying pan, and the little confidence left after realizing your neighbor Gerald is in the same army as you. One guy brought a rake. Another has nothing but a pot on his head. You're not looking at the army of God. You're looking at the drunkest village festival that never ended. But people around you are smiling, puffing their chests, saying God will provide. The priest raises his hands and shouts about holy destiny. You almost believe it, almost, because as soon as someone hands you armor, the dream cracks. This isn't gleaming knightly gear. It's a hand-me-down chainmail shirt that smells like every bad decision its previous owner ever made. Rust, sweat, disappointment. It's all there, soaked in iron links. It weighs more than you thought human shoulders could bear. Sliding it over your head feels like being hugged by a sullen anvil. And the helmet, conical dented, designed by someone who hated necks. There's no padding, just cold metal pressing against your skull, cooking your head slowly like a forgotten stew. For your legs, you're told to wrap wool around them. That's it, just wool. As if thousands of sharp rocks, thorns, and battlefields can be tamed by sad winter socks. Your footwear, don't even ask. You dreamed of tough leather boots? What you get are thin turn shoes, soft leather slippers barely tougher than your grandmother's gloves. Within the first mile, blisters form like they're starting their own congregation. Each step is a sermon in pain. You try to cinch your belt, but it's so tight you nearly faint. The borrowed sword you've been given feels like it wants to escape your hand. And yet, in the mirror of a muddy puddle, you whisper, "I look like a knight." You don't. You look like a scared turnip wrapped in steel and optimism. The trumpets, or maybe just some guy shouting, signal the start. The crusade is moving. You shuffle forward with thousands of others, peasants dragging carts, kids chasing goats, a man insisting he's bringing his piano because God likes music. Everyone's armed, but not everyone's weapon is meant for fighting. You spot a pitchfork, a broomstick with a knife tied on top, even a wooden ladle someone swears is holy. The sound is overwhelming. People pray, sing, argue, cough. A nobleman rides past, shouts something vague like, "Forward men," then promptly disappears, leaving you to trip over a rock and sprain your dignity. Dust kicks up, filling your lungs. The sun burns down, cheerful as if mocking your misery. Sweat drips into places you didn't know had sweat glands. Your thighs rub together in what feels like divine punishment. By the end of the day, your tunic sticks to you like glue, your water tastes like iron and regret, and you've barely left your village. But here's the thing, you're not alone. Every time you stumble, someone grabs your arm. Every time Gerald eats half his rations before noon, someone shares a crust of bread. There's laughter in between the curses, a strange bond forming in the mud. It's a mess, sure, but it's your mess. And as the sun sets behind you, casting long shadows on the road ahead, you realize you've already left the safety of the life you knew. Whatever comes next, hunger, battles, or worse, has already begun. And that's where tonight's journey truly starts. Because before swords clash and cities burn, before the storms and sieges and impossible choices, it all begins with this a ragtag crowd marching east, chasing salvation with more blisters than plans. You wake up on the second morning of your new, holy adventure, and reality has already set in. Your armor is still heavy, your feet are already blistered, and your pack feels like it doubled in weight overnight, even though it only contains 2 onions and a questionable biscuit. You're starting to wonder how in the world you got here. Why did you, and thousands of others, actually sign up for this madness? The answer isn't simple and it isn't noble. Let's be honest. Most of you joined because you were bored. Medieval life wasn't exactly thrilling. If you weren't plowing fields, you were paying taxes, and if you weren't paying taxes, you were praying for rain not to drown your barley. Day in, day out, the same cycle. You knew every wrinkle in the mud outside your cottage. You could predict exactly which goat would wander off and which one would try to bite your hand. Nothing ever changed. So when some fiery preacher promised eternal glory, it sounded like a deal. Glory beat goats, but boredom wasn't the only reason. Fear played its part too. The church was clear, join this crusade, and your sins are wiped away. That meant forgiveness for everything. Lying, stealing, that thing you did behind the barn that you thought God didn't notice. The priest said God saw it all, and he wasn't impressed. But here's the kicker: walk across Europe and wave a sword in the name of Christ, and poof, you're clean again. You could practically hear peasants doing the math in their heads. A lifetime of sin, cleared by one big road trip. Sounds worth it. There was also pressure, not just from priests, but from neighbours, family, even drinking buddies. In the tavern, when one man swore he'd go, another would slam his mug down and say, "Me too." Then another, and another. Pretty soon, not joining looked worse than joining. Nobody wanted to be the guy who stayed behind, tending pigs while the rest of the village marched into history. Peer pressure wasn't invented in high school. It was alive and well in the 11th century, only instead of sneakers or hairstyles, the trend was holy war. And let's not forget the promises of wealth. Rumours spread fast. The East was rich, overflowing with gold, spices, silks, and treasures beyond your imagination. Of course, none of the people spreading these rumors had ever been there. But that didn't matter. Word was enough. Imagine living on barley bread your whole life, then hearing about a land where honey flows like water and cities glitter with jewels. Even if it wasn't true, even if it was exaggerated, it was more exciting than your leaky thatched roof. Still, the most powerful reason was belief. However messy, however mixed with selfishness or greed, a lot of people truly believed this was God's will. Signs in the sky, comets, eclipses, strange lights were taken as proof. Priests spoke with such conviction that doubting them felt like doubting heaven itself. And in a world where faith was as real as the ground beneath your feet, that was enough. You weren't just marching for yourself, you were marching for your soul. So here you are, marching east. Each person around you has their own reason. To your left, a young man who stole a cow last summer and thinks this trip is his ticket to forgiveness. To your right, a woman whose husband died and who now believes God will give her strength on the road. Behind you, Gerald, shirtless, blistered, but still convinced he'll return home with gold pouring from his ears. Every step you take is carried by a mix of boredom, faith, fear, and the tiniest spark of hope that this insane idea might just work out. But hope can only carry you so far. By the third day, you've started to question everything. The sermons back home were loud and passionate, but they didn't mention how bad your boots would smell after just 2 days. They didn't warn you about the constant ache in your shoulders or the gnawing hunger that never seems to fade. They promised glory, but glory feels a lot like sweat and regret right now. At night, you lie on damp ground, staring at the stars, and you wonder, was this really my choice? Did I decide to join? Or was I swept up by noise, by pressure, by promises too shiny to resist? You don't know, but you do know one thing: you're too far in to quit. You're on the road, part of the crowd, and there's no turning back. And that's the truth about why people joined. It wasn't one reason, it was a whole tangled web of them. Boredom, fear, faith, greed, pressure. 1,000 tiny nudges that pushed ordinary people into extraordinary misery. Tomorrow you'll march farther. Tomorrow your pack will feel heavier, your boots will rub harder, and the idea of Jerusalem will seem even more distant. But tonight, you settle into your blanket, whisper a prayer, and tell yourself the same thing everyone else does: God will provide. You don't know if it's true, but right now it's all you've got. The first time someone hands you Orma, you realize this crusade isn't going to look like the paintings. Those glorious images of shining knights on horseback, their polished helmets gleaming in the sun, banners fluttering, trumpets blaring. Forget it. What you get is a chainmail shirt that feels like it was dug out of a swamp and smells like a blacksmith's bad laundry day. It's not even polished. The rings are rusted, bent, some missing entirely. You slip it over your head, and the weight hits you immediately. Not heavy, like a backpack. Heavy like you've just decided to carry a barn door around your shoulders. Every step will feel like a workout you didn't sign up for. By the second hour, you'll be hunching forward like you're carrying an invisible child made entirely of anvils. The helmet. Worse, a conical lump of iron dented in ways that make you wonder if someone already died wearing it. The inside is bare metal, no cloth padding, no leather lining, nothing but cold steel pressing into your forehead until you feel like your brain is slowly being cooked. You try to shift it for comfort, but every adjustment just digs into a new part of your skull. It was clearly designed by someone who hated necks. For your legs, you get wool. Not padded greaves, not shining plates. Just wool strips wrapped around like sad winter socks. You tie them tight, hoping they'll protect you, but deep down you know they won't. The first sharp rock you step on reminds you that yes, wool is still wool. And footwear, oh, don't even start. You dreamed of strong leather boots. Maybe something that made you look like a warrior. Instead, you're given turn shoes, thin, floppy leather slippers barely good enough for church. Within the first mile, your feet are raw. By the second mile, Blisters swell like they're auditioning for sainthood. And by the end of the day, every step feels like punishment for sins you didn't even know you committed. Meanwhile, look around at your fellow Crusaders. It's not an army. It's a costume party gone wrong. One guy is in full mail, polished and impressive, his horse prancing proudly beside him. Next to him is Gerald, shirtless again, carrying a wooden shield he carved himself with the words, "Jesus, watch this," scrawled across it in bad Latin. Another man has literally tied a cooking pot to his head and insists it's blessed. A boy carries a rake. Someone else holds a broomstick with a knife lashed to it, declaring it God's toothpick. This is your army. Not trained soldiers, not disciplined knights, just a ragtag mess of farmers, bakers, butchers, and people who still don't know where Jerusalem is, armed with whatever they could scrounge from the barn. And it's not just the armor, it's the gear you carry. Your pack, for instance, has exactly 2 onions, half a loaf of rock-hard bread, and maybe a chunk of cheese if you're lucky. But no maps, no medical supplies, not even a plan. You'd think someone would have organized supply wagons, but apparently the strategy is march east, trust God, and try not to starve. Even weapons don't inspire confidence. If you're lucky, you borrow a sword from some cousin. It's dull, unbalanced, and swings like it's trying to escape your grip. If you weren't lucky, you're stuck with a kitchen knife or a sharpened stick. Either way, you look at the blade, then at the dented helmet, and realize your chances in battle are slim. Your opponent might not kill you. Your own gear will. And yet, despite the discomfort, there's pride. You catch yourself in a puddle's reflection, standing there with your patched tunic, rusty chainmail, crooked helmet, and you whisper, "I look like a knight." You don't. You look like a nervous turnip wrapped in bad steel. But for a moment, you believe it. That belief, thin and fragile, is what keeps you moving. The trumpet call, or maybe it's just some guy yelling, signals the start of the march. The army shuffles forward. This isn't a glorious cavalry charge. This is thousands of peasants dragging goats, kids, wagons, and whatever junk they thought might be useful. Pots clang, wooden wheels squeak, babies cry, dogs bark. Someone insists on bringing a piano, and every mile you wonder when it'll break. The sound is constant. Prayers, songs, coughing, shouting. You can't escape it. A nobleman rides past, shouting something vague like, "Onward, men," then disappears, leaving you to trip over a rock and land face first in the mud. You push yourself up, only to get stepped on by a donkey. Your pack digs into your shoulders. Your sword, dull and crooked, keeps banging against your leg. Your chain mail cuts into your neck. By the end of the day, you're sweating so much you wonder if you'll dissolve. You didn't think a human body could sweat this much. Your thighs rub together until they're raw. You whisper a prayer for ointment that doesn't exist. And still, the road stretches ahead. Dust clouds rise behind you. The sun beats down like it's in on the joke. And you keep marching, because what else can you do? This is the reality of Crusader gear and the first steps of the march. Not noble, not heroic, not glorious. Just heavy, painful, embarrassing, and exhausting. You dreamed of being a knight in shining armor. Instead, you're a peasant in rust and wool, dragging your blistered feet eastward, hoping salvation is closer than it looks. The march begins, and within the first few miles, you realize something important. This isn't a grand procession. It isn't a holy parade. It's a slow, groaning shuffle that feels less like an army and more like the world's worst county fair on legs. Everyone is moving at once, but not in order. There's no neat formation, no clean lines like you'd imagine from storybooks. It's just a mass of bodies, carts, goats, children, chickens flapping in baskets, and one man who insists on dragging a piano that no one asked for. The sound is relentless. People chanting prayers, others arguing about bread, babies crying, donkeys braying, the occasional crash when someone trips and spills half their belongings into the mud. It's chaos, pure and simple. And the pace? Don't even get started on the pace. You thought an army on the march would thunder forward, trumpets blazing. No, this is more like walking behind your grandmother when she insists she's almost there. You move 3 steps, stop, shuffle sideways because a goat got loose, then move another 2 steps before someone drops a wheel off their cart and blocks the entire road. Progress is measured not in miles, but in how many times you curse under your breath before noon. Your body begins to ache almost immediately. The pack digs into your shoulders like it's trying to carve permanent grooves into your bones. The chainmail rubs roar against your neck. Your boots, already flimsy, are now blister factories. By midday, every step feels like someone hammering nails into your soles. And the dust. Oh, the dust! Clouds rise with each shuffle, coating your mouth, nose, and eyes until you feel like you're chewing on the road itself. But it's not just discomfort. It's the constant noise of people. Thousands of them, all around you, and every single one has something to say. Someone is praying loudly to drown out the complaints. Someone else is singing what they claim is a marching hymn, but it sounds suspiciously like a tavern drinking song about sheep. Children run in circles, bumping into carts, laughing, crying, repeating the cycle. Even the animals join in, goats bleating, dogs barking, cows mooing in complaint at every bump in the road. You thought this would feel like holy unity. Instead, it feels like a market day that never ends. And then there are the noblemen. Every so often, one rides past on horseback, polished armor gleaming, shouting something like, "Forward, brave men of God," before disappearing into the distance. They don't stay. They don't carry packs. They don't trip on rocks or step in donkey droppings. That's left to you, trudging in the mud, sweating through your wool, and wondering if forward is really the best strategy when half the group has no idea where they're going. The first day is hard, the second day is worse. By the third, people are dropping behind. Old men too tired to keep up, children sick from bad food, women limping with raw feet. The road doesn't care. It just stretches endlessly forward. You try not to think about how far Jerusalem actually is. Nobody knows for sure. All you know is that it's east, always east. But east is big. East is forever. And then, of course, it rains. Not gentle rain, not refreshing rain. This is biblical rain. The kind that turns roads into rivers of sludge within minutes. Your feet sink ankle deep in mud with every step. Wagons get stuck. Horses slip. People fall and drag others down with them. You've already fallen twice, once face first, once backward. The goat laughed. You're not imagining it. The mud clings to everything. Your clothes, your pack, your already miserable shoes. The once proud white tunic with its red cross now looks like a stained rag, flapping wetly against your body. Every step squelches. You sound like a very sorry duck, waddling through a nightmare. And when you finally stop for the night, you collapse in wet grass, soaked to the skin, next to strangers who smell just as bad as you. By morning, you've aged a decade. You've only walked a dozen miles, but your body feels like it's been dragging itself across continents. You're already exhausted, already starving, already wondering if Jerusalem is even worth this. And it's only day 4. Meals don't help. Breakfast is a chunk of bread so hard you'd use it to defend yourself. It takes 20 minutes to chew half of it, and you end up gnawing like a desperate dog before giving up. Lunch. There is no lunch. There's just a handful of dried peas or some suspicious berries Gerald swears are safe. Spoiler, they're not. Dinner is stew. Always stew. A bubbling pot of mystery meat and despair. You chew something rubbery, but no one dares ask what it is. Rabbit, boot leather. Both are plausible. You eat anyway, because hunger doesn't care. And speaking of hunger, it's everywhere. People dream out loud of food. Someone claims they saw a fig tree. It's a scarecrow. Another man licks his sword, declaring it tastes of glory. It tastes of rust. He now has tetanus. The constant lack of food gnaws at everyone, making tempers shorter, voices louder, and the march even slower. But the worst part isn't the hunger, the mud, or even the blisters. It's the realization that this miserable slog is the crusade. This is what everyone signed up for. Not glory. Not miracles. Just endless walking, Endless pain, endless noise. You thought your enemies would be warriors with swords. Turns out your true enemy is the road itself. And yet, even in all the misery, there are moments. Someone shares a crust of bread. A group starts singing softly, the tune carrying across the night air like a lullaby. A child laughs, chasing fireflies. A goat stumbles and makes the whole line laugh, breaking the tension for a moment. These tiny sparks of humanity keep the march alive, keep you from collapsing into despair. But deep down, as you stare at the endless road, you know the truth: the march is only beginning. The real hardships, disease, hunger, battles, betrayals, they're still waiting. What you've faced so far is just the warm-up. By now, your stomach has started a daily habit singing hymns. Loud ones, desperate ones. Hymns you only usually hear at funerals. And the sermon it's preaching is simple: feed me. But the crusade has a problem. Feeding thousands of hungry peasants and wannabe warriors isn't just difficult. It's impossible. You were told before you left that the army has supplies. Technically, that's true. The problem is those supplies are either moldy, missing, or hoarded by someone named Brother Ulrich, who insists he's fasting for spiritual clarity while suspiciously chewing in the dark. You've never distrusted a monk more in your life. Breakfast sets the tone. If you're lucky, you get a chunk of bread. Not soft, warm bakery bread. No, this is medieval bread, black as coal, dense enough to double as a siege weapon. You gnaw at it for 20 minutes, make no progress, and end up just kind of holding it in your mouth until your jaw gives up. A friend claims his bread had a nail in it. Nobody is surprised. Lunch doesn't exist. There is no midday feast, no break for sandwiches. There is only the memory of food. Maybe a handful of dried peas if you planned ahead. They taste like dust, despair, and regret. You chew and wonder if this is what eating dirt would be like. Honestly, dirt might be better. And yet, you keep eating because hunger doesn't care about flavor. Hunger only cares about filling the hole in your belly, even if that hole is lined with splinters of stale bread. Sometimes, someone produces something special. A man grins, pulls a salted fish from his sock, and proudly announces dinner is served. You stare. He insists it's fine. You politely decline. You'd rather fast for spiritual clarity. By evening, stew is the big event. Always stew. The glorious, mysterious pot that appears every night, filled with whatever happened to be nearby. Sometimes it's rabbit. Sometimes it's weeds. Sometimes it's definitely not rabbit or weeds. No one asks. Everyone eats. You chew something chewy, hope it's meat, swallow quickly, and move on. One night, someone swears the stew tastes like boot leather. Another swears it's actually boot leather. Both could be right. The hunger drives people mad. Hallucinations creep in. One man points at the horizon, claiming he sees a fig tree. It's a scarecrow. Another licks his rusty sword and insists it tastes of victory. It tastes of tetanus. Soon he's coughing and wheezing, and the healer waves herbs over him until the man either recovers or simply decides not to die out of sheer spite. The logistics of food are a nightmare. The supply wagons crawl behind the march, sometimes raided, sometimes just lost. The peasants along the route aren't happy to see you either. They'd like to keep their winter grain, not donate it to thousands of smelly strangers trampling their fields. So meals become desperate scavenger hunts. You forage for berries. Gerald insists they're safe. Gerald also once ate a candle. You take the berries anyway. 2 hours later, you're crouched behind a bush, regretting every choice that led to this moment. And water. Let's talk about water. You refill your flask from streams that double as horse toilets. It tastes like iron mud and bad decisions. But you drink it anyway, because thirst is worse than disgust. You dream of fresh, clean water. Instead, you get swamp juice and prayers. The hunger isn't just physical. It eats at morale. People snap at each other. Tempers flare. Someone steals a crust of bread, and suddenly 2 grown men are wrestling in the mud over crumbs. Another group swears they smell roasted meat, only to find Gerald chewing on a turnip and grinning like he discovered paradise. And yet, sometimes there are small victories. A village takes pity and sells you eggs, 3 of them, for the price of a goat. You share them with your group, everyone taking a bite like it's treasure. Another day, you find honeycomb, sticky and golden, and for a moment it feels like heaven has opened. The sweetness lingers, a reminder of what food is supposed to taste like. Then it's gone, and you're back to stew. Always stew. The hunger changes you. You used to dream of feasts. Now you dream of bread that doesn't fight back, cheese that isn't green on purpose, and soup that doesn't taste like it's judging you. You'd give anything for your mother's onion stew. You'd even thank her for it, onions and all. That's how far you've fallen. But here's the thing: hunger doesn't kill the crusade. Not yet. It just drags it down, makes every step harder, every prayer louder. It turns the march into a constant test of patience, faith, and stomach. The sermons promised eternal glory. What they didn't mention was eternal stew. So you keep chewing, keep drinking swamp water, keep pretending the stew is edible, because what else can you do? Tomorrow is another day, another march, another fight with bread that doubles as armor. And maybe, just maybe, Jerusalem has food that doesn't taste like despair. By the end of the first week, you've discovered something worse than hunger, worse than blisters, worse even than Gerald's singing. It's the smell. Your smell. Everyone's smell. Let's set the scene: you haven't bathed since you left. Neither has anyone else. Soap isn't a thing here unless you count a lump of tallow that doubles as a candle. Water is rare and precious, so it's reserved for drinking or pouring over wounds while someone screams. Washing your body with it. Forget it. That's a luxury for nobles with time, money, and private rivers. You, meanwhile, are a walking cheese wheel of sweat, dust, and regret. At first, you think maybe it's just you. But no, everyone smells. The entire crusading party has developed what historians politely call a strong collective aroma. You'd call it unbearable. Sweat-soaked wool, rusty iron, damp leather, and whatever stew spilled down someone's front 3 days ago. Thousands of bodies packed together, all producing heat, all wearing the same clothes day after day. It's a smell so powerful it could peel paint off a monastery wall. Your clothes are no better. That proud tunic with its painted cross. It's now beige with mysterious stains you don't remember making. Your undergarments have fused to your skin in certain places. Your boots are damp, alive, and possibly plotting against you. Everything clings, everything chafes, everything reeks. And then there are the lice. Oh yes, tiny armies of them, marching across scalps, hiding in seams, nesting in beards. You scratch until your nails are raw, but it never stops. It becomes the rhythm of the march: shuffle, groan, scratch. Some people even name their lice out of boredom. Gerald swears his have personalities. He might be joking. You're not sure. Fleas join the party too, bouncing happily from one crusader to another. You start waking up at night itching so much you could scream. Sometimes you do. The guy next to you scratches in his sleep, and the sound becomes as normal as snoring. Privacy is gone. Everyone knows where everyone else is scratching. It's a bonding experience in the worst possible way. And let's not forget bodily functions. There are no latrines, no orderly rows of dug pits. You go where you can, behind a bush, under a wagon, or just wherever dignity finally gives up. Privacy? Absolutely not. You now have eye contact stories with strangers that will haunt you forever. One man manages to relieve himself while still walking. The group applauds. Desperation breeds innovation. The water doesn't help. Streams are filthy. Horses drink from them. People wash wounds in them. Some even use them as toilets. And then, when thirst hits, you drink from the same stream. It tastes like iron, mud, and regret. But you drink anyway, because dehydration doesn't care about your standards. Diseases thrive in this mess. Dysentery spreads like wildfire. It starts with one person sneezing or coughing, then half the camp is doubled over behind bushes. You refill your flask from a trickle of water, only to spot 3 horses upstream doing their business. You gag, then drink anyway. Hydration is hydration. Medieval medicine doesn't help. Healers mean well. but their main tools are cloth bandages, leeches, and faith. They wave herbs near your face, mutter prayers, and hope you improve out of sheer awkwardness. Sometimes they suggest bleeding you, which feels like a cruel joke when you're already pale as parchment. One man gets treated with a hot poker. You suddenly feel healthier than ever and run for your life. The symptoms aren't subtle. Fever, chills, stomach cramps, swelling, vomiting. You hear coughing all night, hacking that sounds like rusty gates. You try to stay away from the sick until you realize everyone is sick, including you. Your throat burns, your stomach churns, and you start wondering if Jerusalem is just a metaphor for the afterlife. The priests say it's a test from God. The knights say it's the devil. The tavern maid who tagged along says it's because no one ever washes their hands. She's immediately ignored. Obviously. And still, you march. Because what else can you do? Every morning, you drag yourself out of damp blankets, scratch your lice, cough up whatever's in your lungs, and join the line. By now, you're not just fighting Muslims or rival armies. You're fighting your own body, a war against germs you can't see, parasites you can't escape, and smells so strong they could knock out an ox. The worst part, you still haven't fought anyone yet. No glorious battles, no noble charges, just diarrhea, lice, and the creeping dread that you're losing a holy war against your own immune system. And yet, despite all this misery, you keep going, because everyone else is going. Because the priest says salvation is at the end of the road. Because turning back would mean admitting you walked hundreds of miles just to scratch yourself to death in a ditch. So you march on, coughing, sneezing, scratching, praying. This isn't the crusade you were promised, but it's the one you got. You've been marching for days. You're blistered, starving, scratching, and coughing. By now you're expecting at least a warm welcome from the towns and villages you stumble into. Surely they'll greet you as holy warriors, blessed pilgrims, heroes marching under God's banner. Right? Wrong. To the locals, you're not saints. You're a traveling disaster. Imagine looking out your window and seeing thousands of unwashed strangers stomping through your fields, shouting hymns at midnight, dragging carts, goats, and pianos, all while coughing, sneezing, and demanding food. That's not salvation arriving. That's a plague parade. The first time you approach a town, you're hopeful. You see the walls, the gates, the chance for bread that isn't stale, and all that doesn't taste like varnish. But as soon as the guards spot you, the gates slam shut. You wait, expecting negotiation. Instead, the bishop peeks from a tower, makes the sign of the cross, not in blessing, but in warding you off, and disappears. The only thing offered is silence. Well, silence and the occasional cabbage thrown from the wall. You try to explain your mission. You try to speak of Jerusalem, forgiveness, and holy duty. The villagers don't care. To them, you're an army of strangers with swords and no money. You promise divine rewards. They just want you gone.
Someone shouts, "Take your lice and leave!"
You can't argue with that, and the language barrier doesn't help. You try to ask for water, but accidentally demand someone's wife. You beg for bread, but end up proposing to a goat. The goat is unimpressed. Negotiations collapse. The townsfolk retreat, muttering about the unwashed hordes, and you're left outside, chewing on dried peas and regret. When you do get inside a settlement, it's not much better. Prices skyrocket the moment they see you. Bread costs more than a cow. Hull tastes like varnish and gives you heartburn. The baker eyes you with suspicion as if you're about to steal his last loaf. Children hide behind doorways, peeking out, throwing turnips at your head when they think no one's looking. A turnip hits you square in the face. It's the most accurate missile you've seen all week. And sometimes hostility turns into outright violence. The locals remember the last band of Crusaders who passed through, loud, hungry, thieving, and they're not about to let history repeat itself. They bar their doors, guard their wells, and occasionally form mobs with pitchforks. Suddenly, the Holy Army is running from angry peasants waving farming tools. You wanted glory. You got chased out of town by a man wielding a hoe, but can you blame them? From their perspective, you're a nightmare. You trample their fields, steal their chickens, drink their water, and leave behind nothing but mud, stink, and broken fences. You call yourself an army of God. They call you a plague with banners. Honestly, they're not wrong, and it's not just Christian towns. Once you stumble into foreign lands, the hostility ramps up. Locals there don't just dislike you, they hate you. They don't care about papal blessings or red crosses painted on your shirts. They just want their crops, their goats, and their peace. You, meanwhile, are the loud, coughing tourists nobody asked for. Even when someone tries to help, it goes badly. A farmer offers directions. 2 days later, you realize he just wanted to send you to the next village to get rid of you. Another sells you bread so old it's practically fossilized. You break a tooth. A monk gives you oil so sour it strips the lining of your throat. Every encounter feels less like charity and more like punishment. The worst part is realizing the locals see you not as holy warriors, but as beggars with weapons. You march into their villages chanting prayers, but to them you're just dirty strangers demanding food. They don't see salvation. They see an army of freeloaders. One night, you stop at a village well. You're exhausted, thirsty, desperate. You ask for water. They charge you half a chicken just to lower the bucket. Half a chicken. You pay. The water tastes like rust. You drink anyway, because thirst doesn't care about dignity. And through it all, you keep marching. Hungry, tired, unwelcome. You thought you'd be celebrated along the way. Instead, you're cursed, mocked, and occasionally pelted with turnips. You dreamed of towns opening their gates with feasts and blessings. What you got was locked doors, high prices, and goats giving you side eye. So you march on, not heroes, not saints, just the world's least welcome guests trudging eastward, hoping Jerusalem will treat you better than Europe ever did. At some point on this endless march, someone asks the most dangerous question in history. Hey, does anybody actually know where we're going? Silence. A few coughs. Gerald scratches his beard and points vaguely east. That way. That's it. That's the entire navigation plan. See, maps in the 11th century aren't maps like we know them. They're not neat little charts with roads, rivers, and towns marked in careful ink. No, medieval maps are more like doodles someone's drunk uncle drew on parchment during a sermon. Big circles for cities, squiggly lines for rivers. Maybe a dragon in the corner for decoration. Helpful. Not at all. Entertaining. Yes, until you realize your life depends on this piece of nonsense. So you march east. Always east. But east is a very big direction. East could mean one village over. East could mean the other side of the world. Nobody knows for sure. At first, confidence is high. The priests assure everyone that God will guide the way. The knights puff out their chests and claim they've travelled before, but by the third day of wandering in what looks suspiciously like a circle, even the most faithful start side-eyeing the so-called leaders. The guides you pick up along the way don't help either. A farmer swears he knows the road, but 3 days later you end up in the same field you passed earlier, now missing another goat. A monk points down a path, muttering something about the holy road. Turns out it leads to a swamp. By nightfall, half the Crusaders are knee-deep in mud, cursing saints you've never even heard of. Every fork in the road sparks debate. Left, right, straight. Gerald votes left, because it feels holier. A knight insists on right because his horse sneezed in that direction. The priest says straight because God's path is never crooked. You take straight. It leads to a dead end. Everyone pretends they wanted to stop there anyway. And then there are the rivers. Oh, the rivers. Wide rushing and uncrossable unless you want to drown. No bridges, no boats, just thousands of peasants staring at the water like it's the end of the world. Sometimes you find a ford, shallow enough to cross. Other times, people try to swim and promptly regret it. Boots fill with water, packs drag you down, and suddenly the crusade is holding an impromptu funeral, all because no one thought to bring a raft. The arguments get louder.
We're going in circles.
Someone shouts. Another insists the sun is lying. A third claims the stars told him to turn around. Nobody agrees. The march slows as people bicker, wander off, or sit down in the dirt declaring they're already in Jerusalem. Spoiler, they're not. And the maps. Let's talk more about the maps. When someone finally produces one, you gather around with hope in your heart. Maybe this will solve everything. Then you see it, a giant circle labelled Jerusalem, taking up half the page, Europe squished in the corner, vaguely drawn.
Africa scribble. Asia.
A rumour, dragons in the margins, sea monsters, and a note that says, "Here be God's mysteries." You stare, you laugh, you cry. You march east anyway, because what else can you do? Sometimes you follow roads. But roads aren't always friendly. They lead to towns that slam their gates or forests full of bandits. Other times you try shortcuts through fields, which just means getting lost faster. You pass the same tree 3 times in one day. Someone swears it's a different tree. It's not. You know that knot on the trunk. That tree has seen things. Night doesn't help either. With no torches, you rely on the moon. Clouds cover it, and suddenly you're stumbling in the dark, tripping over roots, falling into ditches, and praying for sunrise. When dawn comes, you're 2 miles farther west than when you started. Congratulations. You've uncrusaded. And then there are the locals who deliberately mislead you. They don't want thousands of stinky strangers trampling their land. So when you ask directions, they smile politely and point you toward the swamp. You thank them, march confidently, and spend the night picking leeches off your legs. The frustration boils over. People start questioning the whole mission. If no one can even find the next town, how are you supposed to find Jerusalem? But the leaders keep insisting, God will provide. God, apparently, provides more blisters, more circles, and more angry villagers with turnips. Still, somehow, you keep going. Lost, confused, hungry, but moving. Every wrong turn becomes a story. Every dead end becomes a campfire joke. And every sunrise brings the same resolve east. Always east, even if east keeps betraying you. By now, you've accepted the truth. This isn't a straight road to glory. It's a crooked path of bad maps, worse guides, and endless arguments. You're not marching with confidence. You're wandering with hope. And hope, thin as it is all that keeps your feet moving. Because maybe, just maybe, if you keep stumbling east, one day you'll wake up and Jerusalem will finally be there. And endlessly lost. And then, finally, the day comes when someone shouts the words everyone's been dreading, but also expecting, "Enemy ahead!" Your stomach drops. This is it. The moment the sermons promised. The knights swore it would be glorious. The priest said angels would guide your sword. You clutch your weapon, trying to look brave. Spoiler, you don't. You look like someone holding a kitchen knife at a bear. The noise rises quickly, trumpets blare. Or maybe it's just Gerald blowing into a hollow gourd. People shout prayers, others scream nonsense. The army surges forward like a drunken mob at a tavern brawl. Formation? None. Discipline 0, it's chaos before it even begins. The archers, eager to prove themselves, loose arrows too early. Half of them fall short. The other half arc back down into your own ranks. You hear a man yelp as an arrow pierces his cooking pot helmet. He's fine. The stew inside isn't. Meanwhile, shields are a problem. Some crusaders don't have any. Others repurpose lids from stew pots. One man grabs a door off a barn and declares himself God's fortress. He promptly trips, slams the door onto his foot, and spends the rest of the battle swearing vengeance on carpentry. When the fight finally begins, it's not elegant. It's not noble. It's survival. Swords clash, sure. But so do hoes, rakes, and broomsticks. A peasant swings a frying pan, dents a helmet, and proudly shouts, "Praise be!" Another loses his only weapon and starts hurling onions from his pack. Turns out onions sting in more ways than one. The knights, mounted and armoured, try to lead charges. But half their horses spook at the noise and bolt. A glorious cavalry charge quickly becomes a stampede of panicked animals, scattering the very army they were supposed to lead. You dive into a ditch to avoid being trampled, clutching your useless sword, wondering if this counts as valor. And then there are the accidents. One man trips over his own scabbard, faceplants in the mud, and gets stepped on by 3 comrades before anyone notices. Another swings so wide with his axe that he clips his ally's helmet instead of the enemy's. A third, desperate, throws his spear with all his might. It flies straight into the wagon, carrying everyone's bread. The bread is now gone, morale plummets. But despite the comedy of errors, blood is real. People fall, cries fill the air, louder than the prayers, louder than the trumpets. The clash is brutal, up close and messy. There's no skill, just desperation. You swing wildly, hoping not to miss, hoping not to get hit. The sound of metal on metal rings in your ears, each strike jarring through your bones. Every breath is dust and sweat and panic. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it's over. The enemy scatters. Or maybe they just got bored. The field is littered with broken weapons, dented helmets, and one particularly angry goose no one remembers bringing. The victorious Crusaders cheer half-heartedly, too exhausted to lift their arms. You slump to the ground shaking, not sure whether to laugh, cry, or vomit. Maybe all 3. Afterward, the stories start. The priest declares it a triumph of faith. The knight claims he personally slew 20 men. You saw him fall off his horse. Gerald insists he scared off the enemy by taking his shirt off again. Everyone embellishes, everyone boasts, but you know the truth. It was chaos, pure chaos. The wounded groan nearby, tended with herbs, rags, and prayers. A man with a gash across his arm insists he's fine. He's not. Another limps, blood soaking his boot, still trying to look heroic. You stare at your sword, smeared with mud more than blood, and wonder if you actually fought or just flailed convincingly. That night, around the campfire, the mood is strange. Relief, fear, pride, and dread all mixed together. Some celebrate, singing loud and off-key. Others sit silent, staring into the flames, haunted by what they've seen. You chew your mystery stew, the taste worse than usual, your stomach tight from nerves. You thought battle would be glorious. Instead, it was confusion, noise, and terror. You thought angels would guide your hand. Instead, you nearly stabbed your own foot. You thought victory would feel like triumph. Instead, it feels like exhaustion. And the worst part, everyone knows this is just the beginning. There will be more battles, bigger ones, harder ones. Today was chaos. Tomorrow will be worse. But for now, you rest. Sword by your side, blisters on your feet, stew in your belly. The crusade marches on, whether you're ready or not. After the chaos of your first battle, you start to realize something sobering. The enemy with swords isn't your biggest threat. The true terror of the crusade is the sky above and the earth beneath your feet. Nature doesn't care about your cross, your prayers, or your plans. Nature just keeps throwing punches. Take the heat, for starters. The midday sun beats down like it's been personally offended by your existence. You sweat through your wool tunic, your chain mail heats up like an oven, and your helmet turns into a cooking pot for your brain. Every step feels heavier, every breath like inhaling from a blacksmith's forge. Men faint in the road. Horses collapse. You keep moving, but your vision blurs, and you wonder if this is what martyrdom feels like. Slowly roasting like a chicken on a spit. And then, just when you start praying for shade, God answers with rain. Buckets of it, not refreshing drizzle, not gentle showers, torrents. The kind of rain that makes you wonder if Noah is about to float by. The dirt road instantly transforms into a river of mud. Your boots sink ankle deep with every squelching step. Wagons get stuck, oxen groan, and you're dragging your belongings like you're being punished in a nightmare. The mud is merciless. It clings to your clothes, weighs you down, fills your shoes until you feel like you're walking with wet bread strapped to your feet. People slip and fall constantly. You fall 3 times before noon, each landing louder than the last. By evening, you look less like a holy warrior and more like a mud sculpture. Night doesn't bring relief. The rain keeps coming, soaking your blankets, your pack, your soul. You huddle under a piece of canvas that leaks steadily, drip, 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 until you fantasize about punching the water itself. Sleep is impossible. You close your eyes and hear thunder rolling, dogs howling, and Gerald snoring like a sawmill. By morning, you're colder, wetter, and grumpier than ever, and then the storms stop, replaced by freezing nights. The temperature drops so fast you feel betrayed by the very air. Your damp clothes cling icily to your body. Your breath comes out in white clouds. Fingers go numb, toes too. You curl up beside others, shivering in a pile, the smell horrendous but the warmth worth it. You'd never admit it out loud, but the only thing keeping you alive is Gerald's ridiculous body heat. The wind joins in, howling across plains, rattling tents, toppling fires. Sparks scatter into the night as people scramble to protect what little warmth they have. Sometimes the gusts are so strong they blow cloaks off shoulders, hats off heads, even a tent right into a stream. You laugh until you realize it was your tent. Snow comes next. Thick, silent, endless. It blinds you, soaks your boots, makes every step a battle. The road vanishes under white drifts. Children cry, men stumble, women curse saints you've never heard of. You thought this was supposed to be a march to Jerusalem. Suddenly it feels like you've been condemned to Siberia. The weather plays tricks too. Heat one day, frost the next. Sunshine followed by storms. You learn quickly, never trust a clear sky. Clouds gather out of nowhere, winds shift without warning, and you're always unprepared. Always. And nature isn't just about weather. It's the terrain. Rocky hills shred your shoes. Forests swallow you whole, every path looking the same, every rustle making you grip your sword tighter. Rivers block your way, forcing desperate crossings that end with half your gear floating downstream. Plains stretch endlessly, flat and featureless, sucking the hope right out of your chest. Even the animals conspire against you. Wolves circle the camp at night, their eyes glinting just beyond the firelight. Horses spook at shadows, sending carts tumbling. Oxen refuse to move. Goats escape constantly, running faster than you thought possible, disappearing into the distance with your dinner. And let's not forget insects. Clouds of flies buzz endlessly, swarming your face, your food, your sores. Mosquitoes sting, fleas bite. Ticks latch on. By the end of the day, you're scratching so much you wonder if you're more insect than human. Every element of the natural world becomes an enemy. You can fight a man with a sword. You can't fight the rain. You can't stab the wind. You can't argue with the sun. All you can do is endure, day after day, mile after mile, praying your body holds out longer than the weather does. And still, somehow you march, covered in mud, teeth chattering, sweat dripping, shoulders sagging. Nature throws everything it has at you, and you just keep stumbling forward, because the only thing worse than walking through all this is stopping in it. This isn't the noble crusade you dreamed of. This is survival, pure and simple. You're not just fighting for Jerusalem. You're fighting for a dry blanket, a warm fire, a clear sky. And right now, those feel like miracles worth more than any relic or holy city. You learn a strange truth on the road. The crusade isn't just a march. It's a moving town with no mayor, no walls, and way too many opinions. By now you've met enough people to fill a fairground, and every one of them brought their baggage. Sometimes a sack of onions, sometimes a grudge, sometimes a story too wild to be true. The sermons back home promised. Brothers in arms. What you got is the weirdest family reunion in history, where half the cousins are armed and the other half are selling you soup that might be shoe leather. To your left walks a baker missing 3 teeth, a gentle soul who swings a rolling pin like a mace. He keeps a pouch of flour for holy purposes, which mostly means dusting his hands before he fights, as if good grip will make him brave. When fear gets him shaking, he tells jokes about bread, stale ones, naturally, and somehow that helps. He gave you a heel of loaf on day 6 that chipped a molar and lifted your mood, in that order. On your right trudges a woman from 2 valleys over, a widow with quiet eyes and a sharper tongue than any sword. She wears her husband's old belt and never speaks his name. At night, she rubs salve into blistered heels and hums the same tune. Always the same, soft and stubborn as a candle that refuses to die in the wind. When men boast about glory, she says nothing. When they cry, she passes the cup first. You don't know her story yet, but the road will tell it soon enough. The road tells everything. And then there's the boy nobody wanted to bring, the one who lied about his age and shaved his first whiskers with a knife duller than your hope. He walks light and fast and never stops asking questions. He's named after a saint, though he curses like a blacksmith in a hailstorm. When the line stalls, he darts to the front to see what's wrong, returns with 3 rumors and a stolen apple, and swears 2 of the 3 are true. He sleeps like a fox and wakes like a drum beat. You call him kid, like everyone else. He grins like it's a knighthood. Of course Gerald is still here, shirtless as a philosophy, chest painted with a crooked cross every morning like a promise he keeps forgetting how to keep. He's the first to volunteer, the last to learn, and the loudest to sing. He believes in luck and onions, and the kind of faith that looks a lot like stubbornness. You've watched him lose a shoe, a shield, and an entire cooked rabbit he swore was tied to his belt. He laughs at the worst moments and somehow makes other people laugh too. On the nights when fear sits heavy as a helmet on your chest, that laugh is oxygen. Your little knot of travellers grows by the day. The tinker joins his cart a miracle of squeaks and spare parts. He can fix a buckle with a nail and a prayer. He mends belts, pots and pride, and asks only for gossip in return. He collects stories like other men collect coins. If his cart ever breaks for good, it will be under the weight of too many secrets. A pair of brothers, both tall and both terrible at whispering, bicker their way from sunrise to moonrise. They argue about routes, rations, saints, and which of them mother loved more. Nothing is settled ever, but when trouble arrives, the brothers move as one body. One raises a shield, the other a voice, and together they look bigger than they are. That's how family works out here, messy until it matters. Not everyone is here for a halo. Some came for coin, plain and simple. The mercenaries wear their honesty like armor. They don't sing hymns, they count payments. They sharpen blades with eyes that scan the crowd like a ledger. They're not cruel, just clear. War is weather, one tells you. You dress for it. When danger comes, they are where you want them, between you and the bad thing. When food comes, they are where you fear, between you and the pot. Then there are the fanatics, God's barefooted firebrands. They strip off shoes and scents alike, striding into rain as if baptism is a daily chore. They quote verses like arrows, fast and many, and their eyes shine with the kind of light that can warm you or burn you depending on where you stand. In a skirmish they charge first, loud and fearless, and die in ways that make the rest of you quiet for hours. At dawn they're back, new faces, same eyes, and you wonder if zeal grows like weeds along the roadside. A man calling himself Brother Patron speaks on a barrel each evening, a half-priest with a borrowed robe and a voice that could sell snow to a mountain. He preaches patience, charity, and the importance of donating weapons to the needy, by which he means him. You'd call him a thief, except he never pockets coin. He gathers promises. It's worse, somehow. Promises weigh more than copper. The relic seller appears whenever spirits dip. He's a mobile miracle market, sleeves full of saints' fingernails and splinters of holy wood, all carefully wrapped in cloth that looks suspiciously like cut-up table linen. One day he swears he's got the thumb of Peter. The next day Peter seems to have a second thumb. He speaks softly, sells cheaper to the desperate, and disappears before the questions catch up. You want to hate him. You can't. He gives hope like a drink watered down, still wet, still something. At the edge of camp sits the quiet pair, a healer and a scribe. The healer's hands are stained with herbs and old blood. She doesn't promise cures. She offers chances. She boils water like it's a spell and counts to steady herself when fear bites her wrist. The scribe writes what he sees, births, deaths, bargains. and ties small knots in the cord around his wrist for moments he can't bear to forget. At night, when the wind is kind, he reads aloud a list of miracles too small for sermons: a fever that broke, a child that laughed, a shoe that lasted 1 more mile than it should have. You listen like a thirsty man listens to rain. The camp also has a black market, though no one calls it that. It lives behind the cook fires, where shadows are thick and rules thin. Here you can trade an extra blanket for 3 boiled eggs, a dented cup for a handful of salt, a favor for a promise you'll regret tomorrow. A boy with bright eyes and fast fingers sells twine, needles, and stories about cities he's never seen. He speaks 5 languages badly and profit in all 6. If you want news, you come here. If you want trouble, you come here twice. Songs travel faster than bread. A man with a cracked lute follows the march, strumming tunes he half remembers and fully invents. He sings of saints and taverns, and a saint who owns a tavern. The verses change nightly as he swaps names and places to fit whatever crowd throws him the fewest insults. One night he sings of a brave crusader who saved a child from a runaway cart. He looks straight at you. You blush. You didn't save the child. You tripped and the cart swerved. But a good song prefers a clean line to a messy truth. People sleep easier under pretty stories. There's a dice circle too, always. Men and women crouch in it like crows around a bright coin. The dice clack, curses fly, and someone always swears the bones are crooked. Wagers are modest at first. Half a heel of bread, a patch of beeswax, a promise to take the dawn watch. But after a good stew the stakes climb. A cloak, a knife, a horse's bridle. One desperate night a man bets his boots. He loses. He walks out barefoot. No one laughs. Everyone understands the kind of hunger that makes sense go quiet. You see kindness in odd shapes. A grizzled archer shows the kid how to fletch a straight arrow with goose feathers and patience. A mother with calloused hands braids the widow's hair, pulling gentle so tears don't fall for either of them. A priest with tired eyes blesses a sleeping line of children and forgets to bless himself. Someone leaves a peach on your blanket one morning. You never find who. You eat it like a sacrament, slow and grateful, sun in your mouth for the first time in a season. You see cruelty too, but it wears everyday clothes. A well-born youth kicks a dog and laughs. That night, his tent rope snaps in the wind and dumps him face first into a puddle that smells like everything you don't want to name. No one saw who loosened the knot. The road writes its own justice, petty and precise. Romance happens in quiet corners. 2 people share water, then warmth, then plans. You pretend not to notice the way everyone pretends, for safety, for privacy, for the silly hope that tenderness will be left alone. Sometimes love makes folks stronger. Sometimes it makes them reckless. One dawn, the lovers don't show up at the line. You hear a rumor they slipped away toward a farm with blue shutters and a good well. You say you hope they made it. You say it twice, in case hope needs echoing. Spies. Probably. The march rolls through lands where every rival has a cousin in the next village and a friend behind the next hill. A man with beautiful boots and empty eyes asks too many questions about the count of horses and the count of fools. You decide not to be counted. The scribe notes a traveller passing through, and no more. When the man leaves, you all breathe easier, which is saying something for people who breathe stew. Rituals form without permission. At dusk, the tinker bangs a spoon on his pan twice, clang, clang, and everyone who's not on guard or in trouble gathers, like metal to a magnet. The healer checks feet, the scribe checks names. The widow counts the children, always out loud, always up to however many there are that day, because numbers steady the heart. Gerald tells a story so wild it surely isn't true, then swears by saints you've never heard of that it absolutely happened to his cousin, and the point isn't truth anyway, it's laughter. Laughter plugs holes the wind keeps making. Discipline, such as it is, arrives in the form of a captain nobody elected. He's young, too clean, and carries a stick he calls order. He shouts about ranks and rows and the proper way to breathe in unison. It lasts an afternoon. The fanatics ignore him, the mercenaries shrug, The baker nods politely and asks if breathing in unison will help his dough rise. By evening, the captain has lost his stick and found humility that sticks longer. Quarrels come like summer flies, constant, irritating, occasionally bloody. Someone accuses someone of stealing cheese that turned out to be a rock. A pot goes missing, it was under a cloak. Two men swing at each other over the correct way to cross a stream, as if water cares about opinions. The widow steps between them and says, "Pick up the pot." They do. The fight ends. It's hard to stay angry when soup is at stake. There's a day you won't forget because nothing dramatic happens, and yet you almost feel human. The weather behaves. The road is kind. You pass a meadow where bees work like monks. The kid finds a feather, sticks it in his cap, and walks taller. The archer whistles a tune that's older than dust. You share a joke with a stranger and realize you'll never know their name, and somehow that's fine. You belong to the road now, and the road belongs to no one. And then, as if to balance the scales, there's the night of the fire. A wine-stoked spark leaps from a pan to a tent to a prayer, and suddenly the middle of camp is a red mouth chewing canvas. People shout and run and throw blankets on flames that laugh at blankets. The healer drags a boy clear. The mercenary opens a barrel that turns out to be vinegar. The flames hiss like gossip. Gerald appears with a wet cloak and a face so serious you don't recognize him. He throws the cloak, drops to his knees, and holds until his hands blister. When the fire finally soaks away, the ground is black and the stars look nervous. No one says the obvious: if the wind had turned, half of you would be cinders. Instead, the scribe ties 3 knots in his cord, and the lute man plays the softest thing he knows. You cry without noise into your blanket. No one looks, which is the kindest way to see. Stories bloom after danger the way mushrooms bloom after rain. The next morning, the kid swears he ran into the fire and carried out 2 babies and a goat. You know for a fact he saved a rolling pin. You decide not to correct him. Some lies are rehearsals for courage. Let the boy practice. The longer you march with this strange company, the more you learn the math of the road. One good person can carry 5 tired ones to the next mile. One ugly rumor can add 3 miles of silence to a day. A bowl of stew is worth 2 apologies. A clean cup is worth a prayer. Shoes are religion. Dry socks are mercy. A kind word at dawn is more useful than a sermon at noon. And if someone hands you the last slice of anything, you are bound to them in ways that do not untie. You start measuring time in shared tasks. Who watered the animals? Who kept first watch? Who sang the middle verse when the singer lost his breath? You keep lists in your head because paper is scarce and memory is a kind of shelter. The list grows long the baker's flour dust halo at sunset, the widow's hum when someone cries, the mercenary who taught the kid to hold a blade like it's a promise, not a threat, the healer's hands shaking only after the wound is wrapped, Gerald's laugh cracking open a bad day like a hard crust, the scribe's voice reading the small miracles and your own name among them, not for heroics, but for washing a stranger's feet when the stream ran sweet for an hour. Not everyone stays. The road keeps its own census with the blunt tools of hunger, fear, and longing. A father turns back when his little girl's cough won't yield, and the healer's eyes say what her mouth won't. The dice man slips away after losing a knife he loved too much to replace. The relic seller vanishes one dawn, leaving behind a scrap of cloth labeled Authentic Cloud. You want to be angry. You can't. The march takes and takes. A man is allowed one escape that harms no one, and not everyone goes forward for the same Jerusalem. For some, the holy city is a hill with a well and a fence that keeps goats honest. For others, it's a place to bury a grief. For you, maybe, it's become the name you give to, not giving up. When the kid asks what you'll do when you finally see those walls, you surprise yourself and say, rest. He nods like you said, win. In a way you did. By now you know what no sermon back home could teach. The crusade is less a fight and more a furnace. It smelts people down to metal and dross, burns off the pretty paint, leaves what's stubborn and true. In this strange company, you've watched cowards become steady, zealots learn to listen, braggarts fall quiet, and quiet ones rise. You've watched yourself too, and the watching is hard. You are braver than you feared and smaller than you hoped, and you keep walking anyway. On an evening when the sky remembers how to be kind, the barrel preacher climbs down without speaking. The fanatics fold their hands and, for once, wait. The lute man tunes, then doesn't play. The healer sits, the scribe unwinds his cord, touches each knot with a thumb, and says, "We are not good. All of us, we are not bad. All of us, we are all here." It sounds simple. It feels like architecture. Later, as the camp settles, you share the last of a pier with the widow and watch the tinker oil a hinge like it's a prayer. The kid falls asleep mid-sentence, hat tilting, feather drooping, dreams probably loud. Gerald snores with dignity he has not earned. Somewhere beyond the fires, wolves consider your little city and shake their heads. Too much noise, too much heat, too much human. They drift away like thoughts you don't have to think tonight. You pull your blanket to your chin and make a small promise to show up at dawn, to carry what you can, to be kinder to the next fool, because the fool might be you tomorrow. The road loves to trade places. You close your eyes. You listen to the mixed choir of this moving town coughs and whispers, prayers and jokes, a pot settling on cooling coals, a rope creaking, a baby sighing in its sleep. It's messy music, but it holds. And as the stars lean closer, you let yourself admit a thing you haven't dared say out loud for all the stink and hunger and fear. You would not want to walk this road alone. Not for a mile. Not for a heartbeat. These misfits are your map now. Your east. Your proof that even a broken crowd can carry light. Sleep comes slow, then all at once. Somewhere in it, you dream a good dream. The march arrives at a city whose gates are open, not because you deserve it, not because anyone won, but because mercy was built into the hinges. In the dream, everyone you love makes it through. In the waking, you'll take whatever the road gives. But tonight, you get the miracle of maybe. Sometimes that's enough to stand up again in the morning. Dawn will come. Of course it will. And with it the business of survival. Catapults to build badly, walls to stare at, ladders to climb and fall from. The furnace has more work to do. The weird company will get weirder. The songs will change key. The cord will gain new knots. And you, stubborn speck that you are, will pick up your pack and walk. Because the truth is simple and heavy. You don't make it to any holy city without holy company. And holiness looks a lot like people who stay when it's easier to leave. The march has been long, too long. You've blood, starved, scratched, wandered in circles, and somehow survived storms, Stu, and Gerald's shirtless philosophy. And now, at last, the crusade reaches its final act, the siege. The sermons back home painted this as the grand finale, the gates of the city, the clash of armies, angels cheering from above. The reality, it's a cold, muddy camp outside thick walls that look down on you like a disappointed parent. You arrive expecting glory. What you get is waiting, endless waiting. Siege life is nothing but mud, boredom, and desperation. You set up camp with thousands of others, a jumble of tents, fires, carts, and wounded pride. Food is scarce. Water is full. The smell makes you wish for a plague mask centuries before its invention. And all the while, the city gates remain closed, unmoved by your hymns and hollow threats. The commanders argue. Build ladders, someone says. Dig tunnels, says another. God will open the gates, insists a priest. God does not, so you build. Ladders from crooked wood, towers from wagons stacked dangerously high, catapults from whatever timbers you can steal. They creak, they wobble, they collapse. One siege tower tips before it's even finished, crushing 2 men and a pot of stew. No one mourns the stew more than Gerald. Every attempt is clumsy. Ladders snap under weight. Ropes fray, stones lobbed by catapults land short. Hitting your own camp once, a massive rock smashes Gerald's tent flat. He crawls out laughing, claims it was a blessing, and paints a bigger cross on his chest. You start to believe the man is invincible, or at least too stubborn for death. Inside the city, defenders mock you. They shout insults from the walls, throw refuse, bang drums. Sometimes they toss bread over just to taunt your hunger. One day they hurl a dead goat, and half the camp fights over whether it's food or a curse. By night, their torches flicker, safe and warm, while you shiver outside, chewing stale rations and cursing the day you left home. Disease doesn't take a break during sieges. If anything, it thrives. The camp is crowded, the latrines are overflowing, and the air is thick with smoke and sickness. Dysentery returns with a vengeance. Coughs echo across the camp like a choir of misery. The healer works until her hands are raw. The scribe adds more knots to his cord than you can bear to count. The kid grows quieter, which scares you more than any arrow. When the attack finally comes, it's chaos, just like every other battle before. Trumpets sound, men shout, ladders slam against the walls. You climb heart-hammering, boots slipping on rungs slick with mud and blood. Stones rain down, arrows whistle past. Someone falls screaming beside you, vanishing into the crush below. You don't look down. You keep climbing. At the top, the defenders push back with poles and boiling water. The heat sears your face. The screams fill your ears. You swing your weapon wildly, not even sure if you hit anything. The press of bodies, the roar of voices, the clash of steel. It's a storm of madness. For a moment, you think you'll be pushed back, crushed under the weight of failure. And then, somehow, the line breaks. The gates give way. The city falls. What follows is not glory, it's chaos. The Crusaders flood the streets like a river of desperation. Looting begins instantly. Gold, cloth, food, anything not nailed down, and even some things that are. Holy relics are snatched up, though half of them are suspiciously shaped like chicken bones. One man claims he's found the true cross. Another swears he's holding a saint's sandal. You don't ask questions. The violence is brutal. Houses burn. Innocents flee. The same people who prayed for salvation yesterday are swinging swords today. You see faces twisted by hunger, greed, fear, all boiling over at once. This is not the holy war you were promised. This is a riot with better marketing. And you, what do? You stumble through the streets, dazed, clutching your weapon like a walking stick. You grab food when you can, a loaf of bread, a handful of figs. You eat until your stomach aches. For the first time in weeks you feel full and ashamed. Both sit heavy in your gut. By nightfall, the city is quiet. Smoke rises. Bodies line the streets. Loot piles intense. The priests declare victory. The knights boast. The soldiers feast. You sit apart, chewing bread, staring at the flames, wondering if this is what salvation looks like. When dawn comes, the city belongs to the Crusaders. The gates are yours, the walls are yours, the treasure is yours. And yet, it doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like exhaustion. You left home chasing glory, forgiveness, and heaven's blessing. You found mud, hunger, disease, and chaos. You wanted to be a knight in shining armor. You ended up a scarecrow in rust and wool. Eventually, the march turns homeward. Some stay, some die, some vanish. You trudge west, thinner, dirtier, scarred in ways no one will see. Villages along the way stare as you pass, not in awe, but in pity or fear. You return to your door with a pack lighter than when you left, except for the weight in your chest. People call you a hero. You smile, nod, and say nothing. They wouldn't understand. The sermons promised eternal glory. The road gave you blisters, lice, and stew. But it also gave you something else, the strange company of misfits, the laugh of Gerald, the hum of the widow, the courage of the kid, the knots of the scribe, the small mercies that kept you moving. And maybe, just maybe, that's the true relic you carried home. Not a splinter of wood, not a bone of a saint, but the memory that even in mud, hunger, and madness, people held each other up. That's not the story they'll tell in the cathedral. But it's the one that will keep you warm on cold nights, long after the banners rot.